Ah, there you go. But I only hear it when you're speaking. Apparently, when you're muted, you're holding the music in your back pocket.
Oh yes.
So we're gonna go without the music. Hi there. Welcome to this show. We're doing vanilla street epistemology. My guest today is Senator Kiwi. And by vanilla, I mean my guest is going to make a claim, and I'm going to use street epistemology to examine that claim. Senator, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What are you about?
All sorts of stuff. I am. That's an interesting question, Dolly. I do a lot of stuff. I like to play some music and this kind of thing. And I got connected, kind of watching street epistemology stuff. By I got started with that sort of thing by watching Anthony and some of the talks that he's had on YouTube and those sorts of things. And I wound up joining the Discord and started talking to you about a year ago, and so it's good to see you. How have you been?
Pretty good. I've had a month of needing a lot of rest, and it now seems like March is a good month again.
Gotcha.
February was a very quiet month.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know. You've been out in the parks and that kind of thing for a little while, and So are you planning on doing that again once the weather warms up?
As soon as we're sure it's safe, and
Gotcha.
then can get our logistics in order. We're ready with our kit. It's all we're all primed and ready to go, and it's a question of knowing that we can do so safely.
Great.
And
Great.
With vaccines, that seems on the very near horizon.
Yeah,
weeks,
at least
months. I'm not really sure, but we don't want to push it.
Yeah, and I get you there, and we definitely don't want to push it. I've just been seeing the numbers and everything going lower and lower. Depends on which state you're in or where you are in the world. So
yeah. I think as far as the rules go, we could go now, and we'll decide, because there's a bit of investment of time to actually get started. So we don't want to start and then stop. We'd rather start and have a high confidence we'll be able to keep going for a good stretch of time.
Gotcha.
In the meantime, we're trying other venues. Reed and Anthony have been doing things on Clubhouse. I'm not allowed in the Clubhouse because I got Androids. I don't know how to get
Is Clubhouse, is that an iPhone thing?
It's iPhone
or
only.
Apple? Yeah. Okay.
It's an Apple only thing. It's not that it's intended long term to be Apple only. It just happens to be that's where they got launched. They'll be Android later when they get stable. So I'll be able to play there. And we're also doing stuff on VR with Quest.
Okay.
And
cool.
I think SE over VR is better than audio, but not as good as video. Thanks for coming on doing video with me.
Gotcha. How when you say it's not as good as video, why is that? Why do you think that is?
So imagine I put an anonymizing mask on my face, and then all you can see is the tilt of my head, and you don't see any notion at all or anything else, and maybe you can see the notion of my hands.
Right.
So it's like doing SE through a puppet, which is better than not having a puppet or not having anything. And VR also, I think VR has some advantages in that you're not afraid to let your children go on VR. They're not going to switch to somebody naked in front of the camera. It's not like that.
Gotcha.
There's a little more room, so people are a little more flexible or comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, SE is very PG rated.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's SE has there's some specific upsides to SE, I think. And some of them are okay. You can talk about things like controversial topics, and so that's kind of even this one in particular, I think is kind of controversial.
It's only 3 letters. How controversial could that be? A and G and P. They're even common letters.
It's an acronym.
Even a Q in there or something. So what is this A, G, and P? Tell me your claim.
So So directly, my claim is that the Blanchard's autogynephilia theory is called.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's BAT. That's what the acronym is for the
Okay.
theory itself. Sometimes it's called Blanchard's autogynephilia or Blanchard's
Yep.
taxonomy, Blanchard's typology. You'll see it
I'm
like
totally gonna hit you up
yeah.
for definitions like crazy. So
Gotcha.
his is Blanchard a his?
Yes, Blanchard
I don't
is
know who Blanchard. I haven't
Blanchard is
met
a
Blanchard.
his. Yes,
Okay.
Blanchard
Blanchard is a
is
his.
a he's a sexologist, and I think
Okay.
he's originally from the U.S., but he's been operating out of Canada for a while or something along those lines. He's done a lot of research
Okay.
out of Canada, so
Is
but
sexologist is sexologist a real thing? Is that a legitimate thing, or is that like maybe
I think
nutritionist
so.
versus
Yeah.
dietitian? One of those is actually real. The other one is anybody could claim it. Something like that. Is sexologist one of those?
I think you have to have a PhD for it, but I'm not 100% sure, and
Okay, so
that's
there's
exactly why we're
actually like
doing
a
this because I
PhD
don't know.
function to it. Cool.
I
All
think
right.
so. Yeah. I'm
Yeah, I
I'm
want to be
about
educated in
99%
these things.
sure that Blanchard himself does have a PhD, like if that
Cool.
matters. I know that that's one of the fallacies in and of itself, that just because you have the note doesn't
Sure.
necessarily mean, that what you're saying is
Right.
correct. But
It could go either way. You wouldn't want to make the genetic fallacy of saying just because it came from somebody who doesn't have a PhD, it's wrong. Or
right.
you don't want to. You also don't want to say that just because it came from a PhD, it's right. Yeah.
Exactly.
False appeal
Exactly.
to authority, I think, is that it's called. But we can
Yeah,
we
that's
can
the one.
compare notes on fallacies later.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Hmm.
So the claim itself, like I said, it's that theory is incorrect. That's
Okay.
that's what my claim is. I also want to say the reason why I even want to talk about this for with street epistemology is because the theory itself, it feels to me like it's very similar to like a flat earth theory, or like to climate change denial, homeopathy,
Okay.
vaccines, like those kinds of things, where you could say, okay, well, I have this study here that says
Uh
that
huh.
vaccines cause autism, or what,
Yeah.
not to get too far into the weeds with those kinds of
Sure.
things, but it raises a lot of like red flags for me, like that. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
And
I are the red flags specifically like those where it's like poorly evidenced, or it has to reject reasonable evidence, or something of that order? When I'm thinking of conspiracy theories like the flat Earth, I have to throw away a huge amount of science,
mhm,
and then I have to overbelieve some very nebulous evidence in order to grab it. So is it like poorly evidenced, or maybe it's poorly defined? Like if I like the vaccines cause autism could be a bit of a
mhm,
Mott and Bailey, where they're defining something and only having to defend it this far, but taking their conclusions that far, that kind of
mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
And if my
It,
question
it
doesn't make sense, we just move on.
no, no, it does make sense. I'm trying
Okay.
to I'm trying to think about specifically why, how this theory kind of feels the same as those. Um, a lot of it has to do with, it's just psychology. You know what I mean? It's like the
Okay.
study of how do humans interact with each other. It's sexology. So
Okay.
a lot of that has to do with the what's the word for it? I can't even think of it. Just psychology in general.
Okay.
You know. So the issue with that is, like, let's say that somebody comes forward and says, like, "Hey, Dolly, I know, unequivocally, here's how fetishes work."
Ah.
We don't really
Okay.
know. Does that does that make sense? Like,
Right. If you were to
somebody could
define it
make
really
a claim
easy,
like
like fetishes are those things you're attracted to that are maybe not normal. That's a really easy. That's an easy claim, but it doesn't say anything important, right?
right, right. It,
Yeah.
it doesn't
So
say
I want to
anything
hear the
important.
claim. Yeah,
So,
I want to understand what AGP mean.
right,
I think
what
I
is
I think I know
AGP?
how to spell what it means, but tell me what it is.
So AGP, it stands for autogynephilia. Okay,
Okay.
and the Blanchard theory itself. what it is it's a theory for trans people, specifically for trans women. And it kind of separates us into two different categories. So one category is HSTS, and then the other category is AGP. Okay. So
HSTS and AGP. And when you say us, do you mean trans people or trans women?
It's specifically for trans women or for
okay, so this only appears to
people.
bifurcate trans women into AGP or HSTS.
Exactly. Yes, you got that 100% right. Yep.
Good. So AGP is autogynaphillia, and auto means like self, or maybe even alone. Gyna means what's in my pants, and philia means I like it a lot, right?
Right. So, well, you're close. So
I'm close.
Like translation of it is the love of oneself as a woman. That's like where he pulled it from. Blanchard came up with this word by just stringing together, Latin prefixes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how he came up with it, and it has those Latin. That's what it means, is the love of oneself as a woman. The theory is that there are two types of trans people. There's two types of trans women. Okay.
Yeah.
His theory is there are the ones who are homosexual. Okay, so that's his verbiage. Okay, so it's going to be like backwards to maybe what.
Okay, if I say homosexual about a trans woman, does that mean that you prefer males or no? Do you prefer males or females as partners?
So
I'm having a hard time keeping the plus minus signs in.
And I 100%. This is one of the reasons why it's a difficult barrier to entry.
Okay.
In if you and I were kind of talking out in the open, just in general, and not away from this theory and everything, if you were to say a homosexual trans woman, then that would mean a trans woman who is attracted to women.
Right.
So lesbian, trans woman.
Right.
Cool. That would make sense. With Blanchard's taxonomy, he's actually using the opposite of that. So he's saying that a homosexual trans woman is a trans woman who is attracted,
who prefers male partners.
Males. Yes.
Okay.
And specifically, to be specific, it's that they are exclusively attracted to males.
Oh, okay.
There's the exclusivity of that attraction. They have
right.
So
they're toward the extreme on the Kinsey scale. There was 0 or 6 or something like that on the Kinsey scale.
Yeah, you could say that. So,
and all that means is that they strongly prefer one and not any of the other. Something like that. Yeah.
Yep. So that's HSTS. Okay.
That's HSTS.
Right. And then
homosexual, transsexual. Is that what the letters mean?
Yes, homosexual, transsexual. That's the whole. That's the whole. Verbiage.
And I bet that just annoys the shit out of people, because if you're saying that trans women are women, then that's a heterosexual transsexual.
Right. So right off the bat,
but the H still works
backwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. The H, and it's confusing because the H works either way. You could switch it and have it be correct, but
okay.
So I may even say it backwards by mistake.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I'm trying to understand what Blanchard is saying that you're saying is wrong. So I'm happy to understand. Yes, and that word I would quibble over, but fine, keep going.
Gotcha. So and then this is probably the part that you actually want, which is what is an autogynaphilia? What is the AGP portion of this? And that would be a trans woman who you used the Kinsey scale before. So it'd be a trans woman who would rate anywhere from 5 to 0 on the Kinsey scale, like the opposite.
5 to 0. Wow. Yeah. That's a wide range. Okay.
So
anybody who is even slightly bisexual or I'm not even going to try to figure out whether this is cis or whatever, but okay.
Yeah. I think the easiest way to think about it is just don't think about it as what the trans person, the relationship necessarily, but just think about what are they attracted to, right? So we could say
Sure.
HSTS is exclusively attracted to men, and then autogynephiles, according to the theory, are bisexual or exclusively attracted
Mm,
to women, or really anything
right.
else, asexual, anything in between.
Right.
That's
And this
all.
is also only talking about trans women, not trans men.
This is not talking about trans men at all. This is just trans women.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep
Are you with
going.
me?
I'm gonna learn this. I want to understand what he's saying. Go ahead.
Mhm. So the you know that's basically the theory in and of itself is here's the two different like types of trans women, and then um the what he's trying to do is he's trying to explain like where does the dysphoria come from. And
Mm,
so for the HSTS trans women who are attracted
hmm
exclusively to men, he's saying that the dysphoria comes in because they are so active, like outwardly feminine, that it makes sense for them to like live as women in the world. Like that just functions better for them. Whereas
mm.
for anyone who's AGP, he's basically saying, okay, it's not your dysphoria basically is stemming from this like sexualization of your own self. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
So that's
Um,
the thought.
right. The way you describe it, it seems like a non sequitur. I don't see the connection. I don't see why the desire for external femininity would inform on whether you're monosexual or bisexual, which seemed like the distinction. I mean, obviously there's the other monosexual included in that range, but
Hmm.
most of the range was bisexual. Hmm.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, I'm not seeing the
Yeah.
reason why Blanchard is proposing this.
Okay. Um.
I'm sort of asking you to steelman Blanchard's position to so
Yeah.
so that so that before we criticize him, and criticizing we will get to, no problem.
Gotcha. The Okay, so I think maybe where you're confused is that you were talking about like bisexuality as being like how does that
Right,
relate?
anywhere
Is
from 1 to
that your
5 on the
question?
Kinsey scale
Right.
is bisexual, and 0 and 6 are monosexual. I'm
Right.
leaving monosexual just so that we don't have to decide whether it's homo or hetero, because obviously Blanchard and you and I maybe disagree on which H means which H, but that's all.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. Maybe is your question, why does Blanchard think that the bisexual or any
Yeah.
other variation of sexual fit into the AGP category? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to understand the reason that leads me to this distinction of, yeah, why?
yeah. Okay. And so his answer is that anyone who is a trans woman who is attracted to both women and men
Uh-huh.
is actually he's basically saying no, you're a liar. That's what it boils down to. AGP theory is basically saying no, you're not actually attracted to men, and instead he calls it a meta attraction, and he
Okay.
says you're not actually attracted to men, but rather you are attracted to the idea of yourself as a woman. And
Okay.
because there is a man, like, if you're interacting with a man, that makes you feel more like a woman. And then, does
Oh.
that make sense? That's basically the direct, his direct claim there is
Hmm.
you're not you're not attracted to the man in the same way that a cisgender woman who's heterosexual would look at a man and be
Mm-hmm.
attracted, to them. It's that by the man being there, that like fulfills your fantasy. Does that make sense?
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
the claim.
Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't ring true in my experience. When I'm interacting with my husband, I don't feel like more like a woman. And when I'm interacting with my wife, I don't feel like more like a man. I feel the
Gotcha.
same.
Yeah, and
I
and
don't
I
see a
think
difference.
that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people, especially those who are bisexual or what have you, are going
Hmm.
to, look at this and say, it doesn't ring true for me, so I don't agree with this, and you kind of, you know, get away from it immediately.
Hmm.
Which is kind of why it feels like one of these anti-vaxxing,
Mm.
like it seems absurd. Does it make
Okay.
sense?
Yes. Yes. And the
So,
way you present it, it seems absurd to me as well. And I want to allow that I'm misunderstanding or you're not understanding something he's saying.
right. I might
But
not
yeah,
be
and that's
presenting it,
okay.
well enough, but um, which I wish I could give it a little bit more, uh, a little bit of a better steel man, as you say.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I'm trying to think
Well, and
of
this invites conversation. If somebody would could explain Blanchard's position, please come on the show. Learn me, educate me, and the people that watch. This is a great discussion to have,
yeah,
especially about why we would think so.
gotcha.
So
Because I might be
you might be.
mischaracterizing it.
I want to allow
Um,
that that's possible.
yeah. I just had a thought, and of course, it popped out of my head. That might have helped. Um, one of the ways that we are more certain that
Hmm.
this theory is correct, or like the reason why it holds more credence is
Hmm.
because Blanchard, he used to work at this place CAMH, which is it's a they do sex research
Okay.
in Canada. I don't think that they're
Okay.
yeah, they're still doing it, but um one of the reasons why Blanchard's studies were like extra special, I guess, or
Okay.
held more water is just because he was using this thing called phelometry, or a phelometric scale, which is exactly what it sounds like. Like hook you hook it up to something to as a measuring device, basically.
Oh. Oh.
Um,
Oh.
and
So are we
so,
talking about how rigid a penis gets?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay. So
So that's
we're measuring the inflation of the
right.
penis. Okay.
Exactly. That's phelometry, right?
Okay.
And so prior to having these phelometry studies, you could get some people in a room who say, "Hey, I'm bisexual," and then all you would have is based on their word. Whereas here, it's more that
Okay.
with the phelometry, they're saying, "Oh, it's more objective."
Okay.
There's some problems with that objectivity, but that's
I
one of the
could see one or
reasons
two.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you
Um,
showed me a bunch of different types of porn, I might
mhm.
suddenly be more aroused by the kind of porn that brings a new idea.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Gotcha.
So,
Yep.
and that might not be something that in long term I'd be all that interested in, but it's interesting to see once.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I might also be really, really turned off because one of them is pretending to be a relative. That's a
Gotcha.
problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem in porn these days. Let me tell you.
Mhm. That's
If you're
that's what
turned
I
off to
hear.
incest, oh,
Yeah. I hear that that's one that is kind of floating around a lot these days, which hasn't
it's a
hasn't
lot
always
of
been
it's a
there.
lot of
Is it?
stupid. Yeah, it seems recent.
Yeah.
It almost seems pandemic-y, which is weird. Okay, not changing the subject to types of porn.
Yeah. No,
It
no, it's all right.
it
But
just comes
that's
up in the volumetry question.
yeah, and the different basically in some of the studies, that's what they were using was pornography to
Hmm.
figure out, and what they would do is they would have two different scales. So they would have the phelometric scale, and then they would also say how, they would ask how aroused are you by this thing.
Hmm.
And so the reason why they came to the conclusion that, okay, bisexual people are liars, or anybody who's in between are liars, is because they may say, yes, this is hot, but then
Hmm.
they don't get the same phelometric response to something that the researchers would consider to be bisexual. Now,
Mm.
the problem with that is, like you said, Okay, if we're talking about porn, like you're gonna
Hmm.
play porn, and then what I that might be different depending on, okay,
Yeah,
is
that's
the person in
complex.
question like a redhead? Somebody might be more into that. There's like so
Right.
many little minutia, um, things going on there that may make you more aroused or less aroused.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's a couple of problems in there, but I don't want to get too far into those ones so much,
Okay.
because that's more in line with like their studies specifically on bisexuality and that kind of thing. One of the reasons why, so in addition to the phelometry being kind of a new thing at that time, when
Hmm.
they were running all these studies, there's a couple of other, in addition to Blanchard, there's also Michael Bailey, and there's Ken Zucker, and there's a couple of other like sexologists who
Hmm.
are collaborating, and they're agreeing with this, and they're saying, yeah, this is pretty legitimate science that we have here.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people who are agreeing with it and then furthering the theory and putting more to it like that. But there's not a whole lot of people who are like critiquing it. There are a couple,
Hmm.
but there's not as many as I would think if you were gonna say, hey, this is false. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, slight change of subject. Why does
Yeah.
Blanchard's opinion matter at all?
Why does Blanchard's opinion matter?
Yeah.
Um,
How does it affect anybody outside of Blanchard?
it's a good question. One of the things that I've been seeing more and more as I've been talking with people who are in the gender critical camp and like turfs and this kind of thing
Okay.
is they have kind of caught on to this AGP thing.
I know
And
what TERF stands for. What is gender critical?
gender critical is basically like without the radical feminists. So turf, for anybody who doesn't know, that's a trans
Trans
exclusionary radical
exclusionary radical feminist.
feminist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like someone who is not
Women, but only
a
cis women in my club. That's what they're going to say.
that's pretty much what their claim is. But
Uh huh.
to say, hey, I'm a radical feminist, a lot of turfs will kind of take problem with that. They say I'm not radical, so I'm
Okay.
just gender
I'm
critical,
just a
which is to
TEF.
say, just the
Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
they kind of have grabbed a hold of this AGP thing and they're using it more and more. I hear it being like whispered places and that kind
Okay.
of thing. So
So the charge of AGP in some way delegitimizes or makes one group of trans women more legitimate than other groups of trans women in the eyes
right,
of trans exclusionary and you said gender critical. So that would just be trans exclusionary, would be gender critical. People who say,
exactly.
no, you have an X and Y, so you're a male and fuck you.
Mhm.
Something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anybody who says those kinds of things, yeah, that
Okay.
it gives them more, more credence because they can then kind of like take people who they would think are AGP and just boil
Hmm.
them down to, see, these are perverts. I don't want
Right.
perverts in the women's restroom. Does that make sense?
Oh boy. Yeah. Hmm.
So and it's not talked about ever, aside from there. It's something that
Okay.
trans women have very much like tried to bury and tried to like, hey, let's not
Mm.
even bring that up. So I might have some people who are mad at me right now for, why are you even talking about it, you know
Because the other side is talking about it. That's fine.
exactly. That's
That's a
that's
good
how I
reason to.
feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
the other side is talking about it, and then there's also that line of, I want to believe as many true things as possible, right? So
Uh-huh.
if it's true, I want to know that it's true,
Yeah.
and if it's not true, then you know, let's explain why it's not true and kind of get it out of here.
Okay. Should I make any of my decisions about policy based on somebody's motivation to change their gender or to acknowledge their gender or to change their external appearance or any of those things? Maybe a
That
different
question,
question.
yeah, so that question, it had a lot of like kind of branches to it.
It
So if we
did.
were just
It
to
did.
take, you know, and which is good because it's open ended, makes me think a little bit more. But
Thank you.
if I were to think of, um, hmm, if I were to think of like just the question of uh policy wise, should you make any policies about, based off of what a trans person's motivation to transition
Right.
is. It kind of makes sense in my head, at least, where you're saying, well, think about it this way, right? So one of the other paraphilias that's like common would be voyeurism. Okay, so
Okay.
so voyeurism is like when you're into like watching other people, basically.
Okay.
Um, and so, like, policy wise, if you were to make it easier for people to be voyeurs, like this is just me kind of
Yeah.
off the top of my head. I've never really thought about this before.
Okay.
So, be easy with me on this one. But
Yes.
if we were to make a policy or something that um where we would say, okay, you can't go into the women's bathroom, but you know since you're a voyeur, go ahead. Does that make
Oh,
sense? Like
oh.
not
Okay. Well,
since
that
you're a
would
voyeur,
violate
okay, but
consent.
since you're a
Yeah.
voyeur here, we'll poke some holes in places so you can at least look in. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
That doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking that if I want to make it easier for voyeurs, I would set up um, uh, public exhibitionist spaces that I assume would be adult only, and you may go exhibit your sex over there, and voyeurs may come watch. All consensual. I think I'd be fine with that.
gotcha.
Um,
And
the
if
idea
that's consensual,
of we're going to
okay.
allow you to violate somebody else's consent. I don't care about your motivation. I don't
Mhm.
care why you'd want to violate somebody else's consent. No.
Yeah. So to steelman for somebody who is gender critical, they would basically be saying, well, hold on a second, Dolly, because if a trans woman is autogynaphilic and their
Okay.
full motivation is that they're turned on by themselves as female,
Okay.
then by them coming into the women's bathroom, that is, them being turned, like that's them. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
might be roundabout,
it sounds
but
like if somebody were to go into the bathroom and close up the stall and have themselves a little pleasure experience by themselves, you would say that's a misuse of the public bathroom, and I say, why am I taking too long?
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, this is about you. How? I'm sorry, I'm taking up the stall.
Yeah. It's complicated.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
something where like I don't know any like out and transitioned, trans women who like feel that way that they're going to be aroused by going into a women's bathroom. So right there, it's like, all right, autogynephilia falls
Yeah.
apart for me because that's just not anyone's experience as far as I understand. I have met and I have talked with,
Yeah.
people who haven't transitioned. They really don't plan to transition, who say that would be, hot for them, or that would be arousing for
Okay.
them to do that. And so, okay, maybe in those specific cases, those people may be AGP, and all right, maybe they shouldn't go into the opposite
Okay.
bathroom. But it's just not our experience as far
Right.
as I'm aware. So, um, yeah, but
Okay. Let me see if I can reflect back a bit.
mhm,
Um, I hear that Blanchard's methodology measures external signs of arousal
mhm,
and presents people with various situations and purports to measure their sexual attraction based on this difference.
mhm.
And somehow, in that measurement, denies bisexual folk, defines everybody as monosexual. Right there, that I think that throws out a whole lot of other. I have to throw a lot of science if I throw out bisexual. That's weird.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
so I see that's a good reason to disbelieve it.
right.
It also seems like the AGP theory is an attack on motivation, and if motivation doesn't influence behavior that affects anybody else, why should I count it when I get a chance to vote on a question? Assuming that somebody's asking me to vote on a question about bathroom policy or something. Well, that's when it matters, right?
Right, right. That is when it
Yeah.
matters.
I think it
Yeah,
also matters a lot if I'm dealing with people and putting them in categories and treating them less respectfully because I question their motivation for doing what.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the I guess that's the main one, is
Yeah.
it also yeah, so the main one is going to be, okay, if we're talking with gender critical folks, and there are they think that this is a legitimate thing, and the reason why they think that it's so legitimate is because, okay, look at all the scientists who are talking about it. They're assuming that
Yeah.
it's not only assuming that it's real, but are assuming that, like, the theory is correct. And um
Uh-huh.
like I said, there's not really any kind of pushback for it. I think maybe what you're trying to say is, why does it matter, right? Why should I care
Hmm.
about what Blanchard says? Why do I care about what any of these sexologists say? Um,
Right.
and I think, I don't know, maybe if it were the case, if AGP, like, actually is this thing as they say,
Hmm.
um, then I don't know, maybe those trans people shouldn't transition. It could be argued, you
Hmm.
know. So there's even, like, that layer.
So
Maybe
if
maybe they
AGV were
should.
true, then perhaps there is a subset of people who should be denied transition.
Not necessarily like legally denied it, but um, I'm wondering, is
So
it
some people
good
should have
for
social
them
pushback because their
necessarily?
trans isn't as legit for reasons.
No, 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 no. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm saying that, is it always going to be positive for somebody in all instances to transition?
No,
Um, so
clearly.
so
Now, most of the
so if
trans people
that's
that I know say it's a net positive, but there are some definite downsides. So definitely there are some downsides. And mostly it's about social pushback.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
mainly social pushback that's gonna,
I
cause
so,
people
so
to
for some I've also
desist.
heard that the medical procedures are painful and inconvenient and electrolysis and a whole bunch of other things. Time consuming, expensive, those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, those things
Yeah.
can kind of get in the way, definitely. So, there's upsides to it, there's downsides to it, and the upsides may not always, be net gains for people, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Which
Yeah.
is not to say, that you shouldn't transition if you want to. If you want to,
Yeah.
absolutely do it. Um,
I think also like my opinion about whether it's a good idea to go skydiving shouldn't influence your option to go do it.
mhm, yeah, Yeah, I
I
agree with
think
that.
people are in charge of their own risk, and
Yeah,
should be allowed to be. That's what being a grown up is all about. You take
right.
away children's opportunity for risk, but not adults.
Mhm. Even, I personally, I think that, hormones should be available to pretty much everybody. I don't even know if you would necessarily, or even if they should be prescription. Um, but that's something where I think that if you want them, you should be able to get them. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm definitely in favor of, if you want to transition, definitely do it. I'm sorry, this light is blasting me in the
Yeah,
face every once in a
the
while.
light is moving.
Yeah, it's hitting me right there. Um,
Yes, you are looking
yeah,
to the west, and the sun is trying to move into your face.
yeah, it's getting through the curtain in a very specific way. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, so the main reason why why I think that even the kind of existence of the studies and these types of things is more or less like dangerous for them to be there.
Hmm.
Um, it's just it makes me scratch my head so much. It makes me look at it and go, "This is right. I don't know if this is right or not. This doesn't,
Hmm.
you know."
Yeah,
Um,
I am
yeah.
being called out for not shooting my messengers, and I agree. I'm not shooting my messengers. I am expressing an opinion that is in line with yours. The reason I would, and this is now I'm going to talk meta about SE for a moment. The reason I would
Okay.
bother to restrict expressing an opinion is to keep from moving you or trying to have my opinion change yours. If I'm agreeing with you, I'm allowed to agree with you so long as I don't create the situation where I'm agreeing with you partially and then telling you because I shut up that I disagree with you on something. And
Mhm.
this is all about whether I generate resistance in you. It's not that I have to formally never ever express an opinion. I'm allowed to express it. It works out as long as I don't create a break in the conversation over it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And this
Yeah.
just being kind of meta with SE is,
Hmm.
I think one of the strengths of street epistemology is that you can use it to combat things like, okay, racism and gender critical. And when I
Hmm.
say combat, I mean we're just asking Socratic questions about
Yeah.
those kinds of things, and maybe they'll kind of like see gender identity on the other end of it and this type of thing. Um,
Hmm.
so this is a subject that I haven't heard anyone talk about in terms of SE, and I thought that maybe it would be good
Yeah. I
to,
haven't. I
yeah,
haven't either.
yeah.
So, getting down to the last little parts, hypotheticals.
Hmm.
What could you hypothetically learn that would increase your confidence that Blanchard is incorrect? What's the kind of data that would make you more sure Blanchard is wrong?
Yeah. So I think the last time that you and I had a discussion, we were talking about like hormones and their effect on the body and these types of things. I think that the more information that we find out about that,
Hmm.
the the less that I think that the Blanchard autogynephilia theory is correct. So, like, it goes lower and lower on the scale as we
Mm,
find out more about the human body and how the endocrine system works and this type
yeah.
of thing. So as more of those things are being shown and being found, and um,
So I
then
hear
that
that you're
kind of,
already ongoingly getting that information. That the
yeah,
more you understand about hormones, the less Blanchard's theory holds water.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool.
um
How about the other side?
for
Hypothetically,
the
what kind of thing doesn't have to be true would lower your confidence? Would make you think that maybe AGP theory holds some water?
um That is an interesting one. I am not sure. um, I'm trying to think. I guess one of the things would be if we found out more that like the hormone side of the world didn't matter, um, then obviously that would have like the opposite effect. But then also, something else might be if we understand more about things like fetishes and paraphilias. Because one of the
Mm,
first things that we had talked about was, okay, fetishes. We don't really know, why they happen. So when somebody comes forward and says, I do have the reason, here is why,
mm-hmm,
it raises a red flag for me and is just kind of met with a lot of suspicion. If we
mm-hmm.
understood that more, if we understood more about paraphilias and we could say, okay, autogynephilia is a paraphilia, and
Okay.
show here's how, then maybe that would make it have more credibility. Another thing might be if it seems like the sexologists who are kind of like pushing for this, they're all it almost feels like they're in a club, like they all
Mm,
communicate with one another, which I guess
sure.
is just how science works in general, where you're
I think
supposed to,
so. Yeah.
you're supposed to
I
be
think
critical.
astrophysicists talk to each other a lot too. That part wouldn't seem weird.
Right, right. So since a lot of them are kind of in favor of this, or using it in some way, um maybe if there was like a new person who came in and could explain it in a different way or something,
Mm-hmm.
that might increase my confidence on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
um
Cool. Both of those seem like very reasonable hypotheticals, very reasonable ways of approaching the data. I
mhm.
like that. I'm a big fan of approaching data.
Gotcha. Yeah. um
Do you have more?
trying to think. No, I'm trying to think if I had any other like points that I wanted to hit, because
Yeah.
I know that
My next question was going to be: are there any questions that I could have asked that I didn't think to?
um I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions for me, like about, is there anything maybe that I've kind of like alluded to that didn't make a whole lot of sense, or
No, I've understood all of this. No, I'm cribbing from the fact that we've had conversations a little on this topic in the past, and
Mhm.
therefore I have spent 3 or 4 hours reading the Wikipedia and the thises and that. So
Mhm.
um, uh, I am a lot more familiar with Blanchard than I let on at the beginning here because I wanted to spill it out.
Okay.
Um, uh, and so that I might have skipped over things because I just assumed they were in common knowledge, stuff like that.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, there was a newer study, and this was by Michael Bailey, who is um he's one of the people in this crew, basically,
Hmm.
that is in favor of autogynephilia. And he, I think it was in like 2018, it wasn't too long ago, but he's basically come forward and said, okay, we think that bisexuality exists now. So that any of this, talking about the AGP theories and how they think that bisexuality is a meta attraction,
Hmm.
that's all from studies from 2005 and back. I think the first
Okay.
one was like 1993, 2005. But Bailey has kind of come forward. I haven't read that one too much, honestly, so I couldn't put too much to it. But I know that it almost seemed like when we were kind of talking about bisexuality a bit, and you had mentioned with your family, and it kind of seemed like you connected with that one a little bit, just because it's almost in opposition.
Sure.
What they're saying is in opposition to your identity in a lot of ways.
Yeah. If you're saying bisexuals don't exist, I'm going to say hello.
Say, wait a minute.
Hello.
Yep. So they
And
they kind of seek to explain it in very different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to have a big paradigm shift before I'm willing to discount bisexuality.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
I think Kinsey from the 50s established it pretty hard, and uh, I haven't received data to think that Kinsey was wrong yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, yeah, did we have any I know that we were having trouble getting like the systems up and running and everything, but the, have any like questions popped up or anything like that?
I haven't gotten questions directly. I think um, there's another user named Floof, which I have not met yet, who may have something to say. Ah, yes, Floof, you may speak. I don't know if you're audible yet. Yeah, I've had much fewer questions than I'm used to
Yeah.
today. It's interesting.
Mhm.
And
I was watching for the questions and I was like, oh, there are none.
yeah, not yet. And yeah, so I think Floof is going to come on, and we're working out automated consent. We're very pro opt-in consent here. If you want to put your voice on YouTube, you have to click the little thingy so that we know that that we go. Yep, no problem. Cool. With that permission thing, you can probably unmute if the whole permission thing is working properly.
Do you have to put a dash in front of it? Because that was muted earlier.
The dash works if you want to put in a question, and then we can promote it up where it says claim up there. And
Hello?
right now, I think we're just trying to do the
Hi, Blue.
audible.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me, Nate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How you doing, Blue?
That was Nathan Ferguson, also known as Abstract Activist, whom I was speaking with earlier this week about this show. And
Mhm.
I asked Nathan and Floof to perhaps comment or come on to talk about the concept. So
Yeah.
I'm all ears.
Should I ask a question or should I explain my background with this first?
Though either of those.
Okay, so I learned about autogynaphillia 2 years ago, and I've been reading about it since then, read all the studies, I'm working on a book about it, and so I'm pretty familiar with it, and I'm above 99 confidence that the typology is mostly accurate, the two-type taxonomy. And yeah, like I think of myself as autogynephilic. I don't think it's a problem. I think it's fine to, be heterosexual, but have it like be aimed at yourself rather than someone else. It's not a big deal. And I'm just, yeah, I
Yeah.
just like to
Okay.
talk about it.
Gotcha.
Yes, please.
Can I hop in for a second?
Yes.
So Floof, I guess my main critique with like the theory just in general is how it characterizes it's like all or nothing, it's like um either everyone who is a trans woman who's a lesbian or is bisexual or any in between, um, either all of them are AGP and like that's the reason why, or there's not really an or there. That's what the that's what the literature says. As far as I understand, if you're exclusively attracted to males, then that's HSTS, and then if anything else, any other combination, is autogynephilia. So do you agree with at least that part, or is it the separate, like the construct of AGP that you more agree with?
I you portrayed the typology correctly. That strictly androphilic MTFs are one type, and non-androphilic ones are the autogynaphilic type.
Hmm.
And I do think it holds for the vast majority of them. Like for instance, in Anne Lawrence's book, she's based on her experience, she thinks it's over 98% of trans women fit into the taxonomy.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think my gripe with the taxonomy right there is, even if one person doesn't fit within that taxonomy, then what's the point of having it? So if I give you an example, Jazz Jennings is, she's pretty well known, and she's kind of like the poster child for HSTS trans people, because she was always saying from the time that she was 5 and all this stuff, I'm supposed to be a girl. But okay, now that she's older, she's dating women and men, and so I guess the question becomes, all right, sounds like she doesn't fit into either category, because I'm not going to say that she's attracted to herself as a woman when she was 3 or 4. That doesn't make sense to me.
like it doesn't make sense that someone as early as 3 or 4 could show behaviors based on their sexual orientation that will in the future be revealed. I asked that weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it plausible that a child that young is impacted by their sexual orientation even if they're not explicitly sexual yet?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Because if somebody, let's say that you have someone who's assigned male at birth, and they're just gay, not with any type of gender differences in there at all. They're cisgender, but they're gay. You can tell in a lot of cases that they're gay. Not all, but in a lot, just because of their mannerisms and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But to say that that's, that her sexual orientation basically is autogynaphilic when she's a kid, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because one of the things that's commonplace for those who are AGP, according to the theory, is that like you would find out when you're in adolescence or later, whereas HSTS are generally, they generally know from birth, or not from birth, but from at least extremely young childhood. So it's odd to me, because it seems like she breaks a lot of the barriers here, and yeah. So I guess that's my critique.
Is that because it's hard to tell which type she fits into, that trans women can't be separated into two types most of the time?
So trans women, you can make those kinds of separations, but and I've seen other studies that have separated trans women into multiple categories. There's like a G1, G3. Gosh, what is that thing called? It's like instead of autogynephiles, they may say like, okay, well, this group is the like cloistered transsexual, or like something along those lines. So there are other theories that are floating around that don't necessarily like pigeonhole people into, it's based off of sexuality. Are you androphilic or not?
Right. And those different taxonomies from the past, there's a bunch of different ones, like you mentioned. And overall, they usually had 2 or 3 categories, and one of them, almost always, there was always one that was strictly androphilic males that that fit the first category in Blanchard's, and then there was also the second category of like people that used to be called transvestites that
Mhm.
had sexual arousal associated with cross-gender ideation, and they tended to have it come later after puberty. Um, you know, not saying it can't happen earlier, but usually after puberty for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
And so they're the finding that there are two main clusters of trans women, that existed in the research for decades leading up to Blanchard's thing. So his was really, it was like a refining of the model that already existed among researchers.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I can agree with that. I've also seen some. I, I don't know if it's anecdotal or not, but I've even seen where you go as far back as like the Ottoman Empire, where they've been saying, hey, here's this phenomenon, we can split trans women into two different categories. So I have, I understand that, yes, we are trying to put, at least trying to put trans women into two categories. And just mainly my gripe is why two and why not, why not more than that? So, um, can I, are you okay? Can I ask about like your sexual orientation and that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have hesitance or shame about this sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So, what how do you identify? I know you said that you were AGP. Are you exclusively attracted to one group, or like how does your sexual orientation work?
Um, so I'm I'm allogynaphilic, which is attracted to women outside of me.
Mm,
Autogynaphilic, attracted to the woman within, and also gynandromorphophilic, which is a term for attraction to feminized males, aka trans
mm,
women. And so I'm into all those different groups, those three different orientations, and yeah, and they all tend to co-occur often in people that are autogynaphilic. So I feel fairly typical in that respect.
okay, gotcha. And are you transitioning at all, or?
Not yet. I'm trying to wait a couple more years. I stopped repressing 2 years ago, so I'm trying to wait 3 or 4 years to make sure that I'm making a decision that's not affected by like new relationship energy or any sort of anything like that. I'm sort of like how
Gotcha.
you wouldn't get married too quick. I'm being cautious.
Okay, sounds good. Um, I'm looking at the text here. Is anybody trying to alert me of something or?
Nope. I was inviting that Fluke could turn on their video if you like. We can both see your faces as you speak about it, and that's not required.
Oh, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm trying to be anonymous for now. In the future, I won't be. So I'm trying to just
Cool,
enjoy
cool.
this piece while it lasts.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Trying to think if Dolly, did you have any questions for Floof? Take the mic for a
Um,
second.
yeah. So I'm interested in um, this taxonomy, and I think Senator Kiwi is saying that a taxonomy is only valuable if it covers all conditions, um, and that there are some edge cases that don't clearly fall into one or the other. If there were a third category, what might that be? What would it be called? And I guess that's a question for
Autoandrophobia
both of you.
would be
Autoandrophobia. Okay,
autoandrophobia. Yeah, that's the other one, which I think that
that'd be the
more
third
like
option.
That's
yeah,
just that's just gender dysphoria, right?
that's pretty much what gender dysphoria is, but it's like, okay, if we want to distill this down to like Latin terms, autoandrophobia is what it is. Like, I feel if you were to say, Kiwi, what's your motivation to transition? I wouldn't say, oh, it's this like sexual of myself thing. I would say it's because I'm terrified of masculinizing. It's just, which as
Mm.
Floof said, it's pretty much dysphoria, but that's what it is I'm scared of masculinizing. um I think that what Blanchard's trying to say is, okay, where does that fear come from? Like, he's trying to get more to the root of it, and basically says you're afraid of that because you're into yourself as a woman, and that's how. Yeah, that's he's basically like extrapolating that, but that would be one of the other categories if you had to make categories.
Right. So, my brain just spaced out there. What was the last
Gotcha.
thing you said?
It's a lot. So the very last thing that I said was that would be a third category, because that was Dolly's question is, hey,
Yeah. So the name of that
taxonomies.
third category was autoandrophobic. No, did I get?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
autoandrophobia.
Yeah.
Tell me what
So
that means. So that's self something dislike or fear. What was the part? What does the
don't like
andro in this case
masculinity in
mean?
yourself.
Andro would be
okay.
masculinization, or
Okay, so in this case, I again have to I have to couch the entire thing that this is only about MTF transsexuals and not FTMs.
right.
Okay.
Although I have talked to some, I can't say that they're FTMs necessarily, because some of them have not transitioned, but I have talked to people who identify as AAP, which is what is that, autoandrophilia, not phobia, but autoandrophilia, where they are allegedly attracted to themselves as men, which, okay. But the literature, like Blanchard's theory, doesn't say anything about that, which is not to say that it doesn't exist, but it's to say that it's for the scope of the conversation. There are papers on this other thing. So
Okay. The next one is granting if some people fall into these obvious taxonomies. How should this influence policy decision? How does it affect policy?
that's a good question. Floof, do you want to take that one first, or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people are worried. A lot of trans women are worried about if this became mainstream that it would lead to a backlash politically. Because of the shared bathrooms thing is one of the hot points that people fight over. And I think if it is true, it's like, how would it impact policy? It might lead to a backlash. However, if it leads to a backlash that's independent from whether or not it's true.
Right.
So,
that's a thing that I'm always trying to get to is, okay, what the backlash doesn't matter so much. What is the real? Is it true or not?
Mm-hmm.
So
Am
I
I
almost
audible?
don't care about what the backlash would be. Is it true?
Thank you. I just got discorded. I'm defining that the verb to discord one is to disconnect abruptly. I'm coining that term.
Gotcha. Did you miss anything that Floof just said a minute ago?
You did.
Okay.
I was out for a good 15 seconds.
I interrupted Floof, so I apologize. First off, Floof, can I ask do you have specific pronouns that you use?
No, not. I'm trying to stay away from the identity stuff because it seems like it could lead to dysphoria. I didn't have a good. Yeah.
I'll just keep calling you Floof. It rolls off the tongue. It's fun to say. Floof.
You can use he. I'm fine with he.
Okay, so my last question, and you can reiterate for me the answer, is what policy? How should policy be affected? How should policy be influenced by this taxonomy?
So I don't know that it should be necessarily like that. That trans women should. I don't think that it should have a big impact on policy necessarily. I think evidence that there are somehow harms being created by integration into like same-sex spaces or whatever. Like once evidence comes that there is a harm, then we could act on that. But
Mm-hmm.
as it stands right now, if this is true that there's two types, then that's probably always been the case through the generations, and it doesn't seem to be like an epidemic of problems with trans women going in women's bathrooms and things like that. So
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of
I hear you saying that the bathroom thing doesn't actually show harm. It's a theoretical harm, and people are bringing it up to force a position out of a scare. It's a scare tactic.
yeah. So far
Okay.
it's hypothetical because there's not good data on it.
Okay. So what if I were given a chance to vote on something that would influence how easy it is for people to transition, like whether it's covered medically or something like that? Should this taxonomy affect anything about my choice to vote for that? Should it be easier for one than another? Should there be any difference?
I don't think it would be right to discriminate based on ideology because that's discriminating based on different sexual orientation.
Okay. So it specifically should be prohibited as a discriminatory thing because it's based in sexual preference, and that's one of the protected categories.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
we,
So effectively, if I get a chance to vote, I wouldn't even have to know about this to be able to vote correctly. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to know that much about it, I don't think. People already don't know much about it, but they're forming opinions anyways.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess last thing, could you tell me what is the most important thing that I should know in order for, if I get a chance to vote on any of these things, I'd be well equipped?
Just that autogynaphillia is not as overtly sexual as it may be portrayed, and it has a really powerful impact on your sentiments and your emotions to a
Okay.
large degree. It makes you elevate femininity and devalue masculinity, and so it makes
Okay.
you want the feminine traits for yourself and makes you want the masculine traits to go away. And so if this is leading to a small percentage of males, say like 2 to 3%, having these feelings, then
Mm-hmm.
it might ultimately be beneficial if their orientation compels them to act more feminine and be more feminine, because females in general are less harmful to society in terms of violence and things like that. So if we emulate females, it will ultimately cause less harm.
Okay, so if you're going to act male or you're going to act female, and you've got a choice, and acting female is better in the social good because males cause damage.
Yes.
Okay.
That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that just in general, like if the theory is correct, you still need to have just equal access to hormones and transition and all this stuff, because as Floof said, we're still showing net positives for almost all people. So Floof mentioned that Anne Lawrence said it was something like 98%, I think he said, of trans people, or of trans women may be autogynaphilic. So if
no, that fit into the taxonomy.
That fit within the taxonomy.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
98% fit within the taxonomy. Okay.
Okay. All right. I see what you're saying. And then Cantor's looked at a couple of he's had a couple of studies where I think he's brought in and just basically said, okay, by and large, it's still beneficial for people who are AGP to transition, no matter where you fall in the taxonomy. Like if you want to transition, you should, and it's usually beneficial to do so. Post transition, you're better off, you're happier, this type of thing. So regardless of
do you know what the odds are? Do you know what the ratio of people that report, say 5 years later, that it was a generally good thing versus those that regret?
I'm not familiar off the top of my head with what the numbers are, but I do know
Hmm.
that it's positive just overall.
Okay, so it's at least the majority.
Hmm.
Okay. I've heard reported a bunch of numbers about that, and
Yeah,
I don't know who to trust on that stuff.
yeah.
Um,
So the interesting
although
thing is,
everybody says it's a majority, so good.
yeah, there's one and I can pull these up for you, later if
Hmm.
you're interested at all. But there's one that where
If you
they
pull it up,
abstract.
if you pull it
Yeah.
up, send us the text, and we will put those links in the description of the video.
Okay. There was the one that I'm thinking of. It had like 52 different sources. So
Cool.
it's collaboration. What's the word for that? I can't even think of it. But it's when you have a whole bunch of different studies, you add them in together. It's
A
like a review
meta-analysis.
or something. Yeah,
Meta-analysis study, meta studies. Yeah.
meta-analysis. Y'all know
Cool.
what I'm
Cool.
talking about.
Yeah.
Everything's meta up in here today.
Hmm. So, Floof, my last two questions, um, they're very predictable. You were at 99% that the taxonomy was valid. Uh,
Yeah.
what could raise your confidence to 99.5 or whatever? What kind of thing would raise your confidence that the taxonomy was distinct and AGP is a real thing? Maybe those are two different.
They are different things. Because AGP is also independently a sexual orientation.
Okay.
I mean, just over time, it's increased. So the longer I keep reading about it and talking to people, it's gone up, and I anticipate that will continue as I keep talking to people.
Okay. So increasing your N as long as the trend continues would be the kind of thing that would increase. Great.
Yeah.
How about the other direction? What kind of thing could you learn that would make you either doubt that the taxonomy was valid or that AGP was a good analysis?
Well, if there started being lower percentages of trans women that reported transvestic arousal at some point in their history, because usually it's around 70 to 80% report at least once in their past they got transvestically aroused.
Oh.
In terms of the autogynaphilic ones.
Oh, well, I qualify, and I'm not trans.
Oh, like in terms of wearing women's clothing and you got aroused?
Yeah.
And it's pretty common in males.
Yeah.
Like
Now with a
maybe even
beard
have
like
it
this, you
learned.
can imagine it's quite the gender fuck. But I love dressing across social expectations, and getting in costume and getting dolled up or something like that is very exciting and interesting to me.
Yeah, and when you did that, did it
Mhm.
cause you to change your behavior or your affect in any way?
Sure. I'm playing a role at that point, and so I don't know if I'm going to say I'm acting feminine, but I'm playing a role, and the role is dressed up feminine, so probably yes.
Yeah, and that's normal. When people are autogynaphilic, that the women's clothing
Hmm.
just symbolizes femininity, and it causes this like consciousness shift that'll like change your behavior.
Sure.
And yeah, and it's very emotionally
I wear this
rewarding.
shirt when I do SE because it changes my behavior. I'm very costume driven.
Yeah, and so yeah, the thing that make my confidence go down is just if we found more types, for instance.
Okay.
Because there's a proposed third type, the rapid onset gender dysphoria, but that mostly affects females and is very tentative, the data about that so far.
Okay.
Just that so there may be a third type. It mostly affects females, but it may theoretically impact some decision of males to transition. In which case I would update to a 3-type taxonomy if
Okay.
yeah.
Whether it's a 2-type or a 3-type doesn't seem to be probably very important. I don't want to discount things, but it seems like I think Kiwi's claim is that AGP is is not correct, and that your claim is AGP is correct, and there's also the claim that AGP and the other STS cover the vast majority, something like
Right.
that.
So to be clear, my claim is not necessarily that AGP is incorrect. It's that Blanchard's taxonomy, his two set grouping is incorrect.
I see.
I think that there are people who are genuinely AGP. I think that
Okay.
that might be a thing that does happen to some people. It might be the case for Floof, or, and this is just me if I'm being completely honest, it might be that Floof is just understanding it that way and might be like repressing a gender identity, which I don't want to necessarily say that that's the case. It's, but that's, unfortunately, that's where my thinking goes, I guess. So just because I've seen it with other people also. But I know that Floof said earlier something like was it between 70 and 80% of
Like gynephilic trans women.
Right, gynephilic trans women would experience what did you say? It's transvestic arousal.
At least at one point in their life.
My gripe with that one, and this was out of Moser's critique, is that 36% of the HSTS also experienced that type of arousal. So then the question becomes, well, Blanchard would say, okay, then that means that 36% of the HSTS were just identified, incorrectly, and they should be on this other side. So there's so much overlap between these two. I think that transvestic arousal is just a thing that happens sometimes to people, and it's not necessarily that it's going to be it's not necessarily that it's going to be like the cause of your gender identity differentiation. Like, if you have a different gender identity, I think that you're probably more, the chances of you being aroused by like clothing of the opposite gender is it's probably going to be more likely, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, Moser's critique, like I said, that said that there was 36% of HSTS were experiencing the same thing. So that would
Can I talk to that one about how the separating into two categories? So in Blanchard's 85 typology study, he found that 15% of the homosexual group had experienced transvestic arousal, and in 2011 in Nutbrock et al., they revisited that and they found that 23% of their homosexual group, said that they had transvestic arousal at some point in their life. So what I think this shows is more that it might be hard to separate the two groups in terms of doing studies. Like, it may be hard to know if someone belongs in one group or the other, but it doesn't necessarily, just because it's hard to slot someone into a group doesn't mean that there are no groups or that there are more than two groups. For instance, there's the meta-androphilia thing, which is causing the AGPs to get slotted into the homosexual group. The pseudo bisexuality, Blanchard called it, where you get attracted to men because it reinforces your femininity. That is a very powerful stimulus for a lot of autogynephilic people. It's incredibly powerful, and a lot of them over time switch to only wanting male partners and do identify. If they've transitioned, they'll identify as straight, or pre-transition, they'll identify as gay, and they'll only want male sexual partners. And they got that way through a different route, but on the outside it looks the same, that they're just being with males.
Okay. Yeah, I see how that could be something that you just get categorized wrong, or so I get that.
Very good. Have we gotten to oh yeah, so Nathan, who is asking, what are questions that each of you could ask each other to better understand how you got to your confidence level? We want to have you guys question each other.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like you have one.
Well, I didn't, but I was just gonna start talking.
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. How did you arrive at your current confidence level? Like, did you read the research?
Yeah, I like to think that I did. I'm probably not the sharpest of all the tools in all the sheds, but you know, I've done what I can. I came out to my parents and then also to a lot of my friends at school when I was a teenager, when I was like 14 or 15, and but I'm 28 right now, so it doesn't seem like it was a big difference in time, but it actually was. It was a different time back then, you know. So people just didn't know what trans was and this type of thing. So the reason why I mentioned that is because I've been researching this stuff for years and years and years and years. Like I've been trying to figure out, okay, well, if my parents didn't want me to transition and this kind of thing, okay, well, how can I get hormones without their consent? And this, you know, so I pretty much had to deep dive on it. And you know, years ago there was not any like talk about AGP or anything like that. There was so it's a more recent thing, I think, that anybody's even talking about it, anybody's looking at it. It seemed like it was just something from the past that okay, Blanchard says it's this, and he got that way wrong, and we just kind of like cast it to the side and moved on. So that's kind of where I am, where I'm looking at it and going, you know, this was happening in 2005 when he published this. Well, I was reading a lot then. Why didn't I see it? You know, does that help at all?
I think so. I have a question. If you were to talk to trans women that said that, and they said, yes, I'm autogynaphilic, and that was part of my motivations and what shaped my thinking.
Hmm.
If they said that, would you lower your confidence?
Um, it depends on how many of them I guess I would run into. I don't think that it would lower my confidence so much because I understand that autogynephilia is a thing. Like I get that it's something that can happen. My argument is more that it doesn't apply to all. It doesn't account for all non-androphilic trans people. So I do know a few, and I talk with a lot of people who are AGP because they're going through rough times, I think, and you know, so I try and help them out the best I can. And so I don't think that would change, you know, my confidence scale by meeting more of them or talking to more of them necessarily.
Is there any information you could encounter that would make you believe that Blanchard's taxonomy was correct?
So that's one that we kind of went over a little bit earlier. So if there was more research to show that, you know, the hormonal and the endocrine system is not really changing the way that your, you know, affect is at all. And then also if I could get more research about like how fetishes work, how paraphilias work, those kinds of things. If we were a little bit more conclusive about them, then I think I would be able to make you know, change where I stand on it. Yeah, I had another thought that just escaped me.
I think likely that we could have thoughts that would escape us for another session. And I would so invite another day for us to go over this or similar topics again. So if either of you are available for that, hit me up. Let's just schedule it because this is a deep and interesting topic, and I'd love to have more time to discuss it.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Yeah.
is there any last words before I close out from either?
Thanks for
No.
letting me talk for the bit that I did. I know I
Yes.
came in late, but I
Thanks for
care
talking.
passionately about this topic,
Yeah.
and I just want more people to understand more true things about it because there's a lot of disinformation out there.
Mhm.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thanks.
We're gonna have
Thanks
an
for
after
coming
show.
on and being thanks for hopping in with me, Floof, because it's tough kind of just talking about this stuff, especially if you're talking to a group who's like not within it necessarily. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Also, there's a something I want to avoid is having a group of cis people talk about it all exclusively. Even if they're right, why should I care? You know.
Mhm.
So thanks for bringing an actual position that from a trans perspective. Appreciate both of you in that a lot.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let's go to the closing scenes. Thank you. The closing scenes, I'll respond when I see them. This is Cordial Curiosity channel. I asked Senator Kiwi what she would like to put. She said, "Boost read, great, boost read." Go check out Cordial Curiosity. He's doing a bunch of things on Twitch and a bunch of things on YouTube. That's very, very cool. Okay, here are 5 of my favorite street epistemology channels. You'll notice Cordial Curiosity is right in there, and I so agree. Boost read. And this is part of a list of about 15 if you go to my YouTube page. If you really like this method of street epistemology, I recommend going to streetepistemology.com. It's a one-stop shopping opportunity where you can find all the ways to get to the Facebook, all the ways to get to the Discord, all the different materials, instructional things. Also, the SE podcast for those of you who like your street epistemology stuck right in your ear without all this faffing about in video. Thank you for coming to this vanilla street epistemology. If you would like to be